Lisa Parker was a single mother raising two young children, 8-year-old Mia and 4-year-old Jaden, in a small, quiet town. She worked hard every day to provide for her kids and often spent her weekends taking them on errands, using every moment she could to teach them about kindness and responsibility. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Lisa and her kids walked into a local grocery store. Jaden held onto her hand tightly, while Mia skipped beside her, chattering about a school project. Lisa smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm, though her mind was busy calculating her budget for the week. While picking up a few necessities, Lisa noticed a commotion near the store's entrance. A man was angrily gesturing toward her and calling for a store employee. She didn't pay much attention at first, assuming it had nothing to do with her. But soon, two uniformed police officers entered the store and approached her. "Ma'am," one of the officers said sternly, "we've received a report that you were involved in a theft here." Lisa froze. "What? That's a mistake. I didn't steal anything," she said, her voice steady but confused. The officer gave her a hard look. "We need you to come with us while we investigate." Lisa felt her heart race. She looked down at her children, who were clinging to her legs, their wide eyes filled with fear. "Please," she said, keeping her voice calm. "There's been a misunderstanding. I've only bought a few items for my kids. You can check my bag if you want." But the officers weren't listening. One of them reached for her arm, and Lisa instinctively stepped back. "Wait," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "I have my kids here. I can't leave them." Mia started to cry, clutching her mother's coat. Jaden, too young to fully understand, held onto Lisa's hand tightly and shouted, "Don't take my mommy." The officers, seemingly unmoved, began pulling Lisa toward the store entrance. Her protests grew louder. "Please, I didn't do anything. My children are scared. Don't treat us like this." The scene drew the attention of other shoppers, some of whom began recording the incident on their phones. A few stepped forward to defend Lisa, saying they hadn't seen her do anything wrong. But the officers ignored them. As Lisa was led outside, she tried to reassure Mia and Jaden, her voice trembling. "It's okay, babies. Mommy's right here. Everything's going to be okay." But nothing felt okay. The sight of their mother in handcuffs broke something in the children. Mia sobbed uncontrollably, while Jaden, in a burst of fear and anger, struggled against an officer trying to separate him from Lisa. "Please," Lisa cried, her voice cracking as she tried to reach her son. "Don't hurt him. He's just a little boy." The officers, focused on their procedures, didn't seem to hear her. And as the police car doors slammed shut, Lisa's heart sank. She knew her life, and her children's, would never be the same. Lisa sat in the back of the police car, her hands cuffed behind her, watching her children through the window. Mia was crying uncontrollably, standing frozen on the sidewalk. Jaden, on the other hand, was still trying to run toward the car, yelling, "Mommy, don't leave. Please," Lisa begged the officers from the back seat. "Let me stay with my kids. They're terrified. I haven't done anything wrong. This is all a misunderstanding." The officer driving didn't even glance back. "We're just doing our job, ma'am. They'll be fine. Someone will call social services if necessary." Lisa's heart raced. Social services. The thought of her children being taken away from her, even temporarily, made her stomach churn. She turned back to look at Jaden, who was now being held back by one of the officers on the scene. "Mommy, don't go," he screamed, tears streaming down his face. Lisa felt helpless. She couldn't hold him, couldn't reassure him. Her hands were tied. Literally. As the police car began to pull away, she could hear Mia's cries fading into the background. The weight of the moment crushed her. How had her ordinary day turned into this nightmare? At the station, Lisa was led into a cold, gray room. The officers removed the cuffs and told her to sit down. Her wrists throbbed, and her head spun with worry for her children. "Can you at least tell me where my kids are?" she asked, her voice trembling. "They're with another officer," One of the officers replied curtly, "We're handling it. Handling it." The phrase sent chills down her spine. Lisa knew her children didn't trust strangers, and they must be feeling scared and alone. Meanwhile, back at the scene, the situation was spiraling out of control. Jaden had broken free from the officer holding him and ran toward the car where his mother had been taken. He tripped on the curb and fell hard onto the pavement. The officer, trying to grab him, stumbled as well, causing a loud commotion. Bystanders gasped and rushed forward to check on Jaden, who was lying still on the ground. "Is he okay?" someone shouted. "He's just a child." Another person yelled, their voice filled with anger. The officer knelt beside Jaden, calling for paramedics over his radio. Mia, still standing nearby, screamed, "Jaden, get up. Please, get up." When Lisa was told about the incident back at the scene, she froze. "What happened to my son? Is he okay? Tell me he's okay." The officers didn't meet her eyes. One of them muttered, "He's being looked at. That's all we know right now." Lisa felt her knees buckle. Her worst fear was coming true, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest as she sat in the cold, gray interrogation room, waiting for answers. Her thoughts were consumed by her children, especially Jaden. The officer's vague response about her son being looked at filled her with dread. She couldn't bear the idea of him being hurt, especially after everything they had already been through. Minutes felt like hours, and Lisa's anxiety grew with every second. Finally, the door opened, and another officer entered the room, his face grim. He carried a clipboard but avoided making eye contact. "Ms. Parker," he began, his voice low, "we need to inform you that there was an incident involving your son at the scene." Lisa stood up so quickly her chair tipped over. "What happened? Is Jaden okay? Where is he?" The officer hesitated, then sighed. "Jaden fell during the commotion and hit his head. He's been taken to the hospital." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "Hospital? How bad is it? I need to see him. Please, take me to him." The officer shook his head. "Right now, he's being treated. We'll update you when we know more." Lisa's knees felt weak, and she sank back into the chair. Tears streamed down her face as she gripped the edge of the table. Her mind raced with questions. How could this have happened? Why weren't they more careful with her son? Back at the hospital, doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to stabilize Jaden. Mia, still in shock, sat quietly in a waiting room with a kind nurse who had been assigned to watch her. The once lively little girl was now silent, her wide eyes staring at the floor as if trying to make sense of everything. Word of the incident had already spread throughout the small town. Bystanders who had witnessed the scene began sharing videos online, sparking outrage. Social media erupted with demands for answers, and local news outlets picked up the story. Protesters started gathering outside the police station, holding signs and chanting for justice. Inside the station, Lisa's grief was turning into anger. She slammed her fists on the table, startling the officer across from her. "This is your fault," she shouted, her voice shaking. "You dragged us here over nothing, and now my son is in the hospital. He's just a little boy. How could you let this happen?" The officer shifted uncomfortably. "We're investigating the situation, ma'am, but right now we need your cooperation." "Cooperation?" Lisa spat the word. "You're asking for my cooperation after what you did to my family." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. Lisa knew she couldn't sit there and wait any longer. She needed to be with her son, to hold his hand and let him know she was there. As the officer left the room, Lisa sat alone, clutching her hands together and whispering a quiet prayer. Please let Jaden be okay. Please. But deep down, she knew her life would never be the same. Lisa was finally allowed to leave the police station hours later, but those hours felt like an eternity. She was desperate to see Jaden and Mia, her mind racing with fear and worry. As she stepped outside, she was met with an unexpected sight. A group of protesters gathered near the station, holding signs that read "Justice for Jaden" and "Protect our children." Their chants filled the air, and Lisa felt an overwhelming mix of gratitude and sorrow. A kind woman from the crowd approached her. "We're with you," she said gently. "We've seen the videos. What they did was wrong." Lisa nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She didn't have the strength to say much, but their support gave her a small glimmer of hope in a day that had been full of despair. An officer reluctantly agreed to drive her to the hospital. As the car approached the building, Lisa could see reporters outside, their cameras ready. She braced herself, clutching her hands together as the car came to a stop. Inside the hospital, Lisa rushed to the front desk. "I'm here for my son, Jaden Parker. He was brought in earlier," she said, her voice trembling. The nurse at the desk checked her records and gave Lisa a sympathetic look. "He's in the IQ. The doctor will meet you shortly." Lisa felt her legs weaken, but she forced herself to stand tall. She couldn't break down. Not yet. She had to be strong for Jaden and Mia. A nurse led her to a small waiting room, where Mia was sitting with the same kind nurse who had been comforting her earlier. When Mia saw her mother, she ran into Lisa's arms, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy, is Jaden going to be okay?" Maya asked, her voice shaky. Lisa held her tightly, stroking her hair. "I don't know, baby, but we're going to pray and hope for the best. He's strong, and he knows we love him." Just then, a doctor entered the room, his face serious but kind. "Ms. Parker, I'm Dr. Harris. I've been treating your son. He suffered a serious head injury, but we've stabilized him for now. He's unconscious, but we're doing everything we can." Lisa felt a wave of relief that Jaden was still alive, but the doctor's words also filled her with dread. "Can I see him?" she asked. Dr. Harris nodded. "Of course. He's in the ICU. Just keep it brief for now." Lisa followed the doctor to Jaden's room, her heart pounding with every step. When she saw her little boy lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines, her breath caught in her throat. She sat beside him, taking his small hand in hers. "Jaden," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Mommy's here. I love you so much. You're going to get through this. We're going to get through this." As tears rolled down her cheeks, Lisa vowed to fight for justice for her son. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she couldn't stay silent. Lisa spent the night in the hospital room, sitting beside Jaden's bed. The soft beeping of the machines and the faint glow of the monitors were the only sounds in the quiet room. Mia was asleep on a small couch, her tiny body curled up and clutching a blanket tightly. Lisa gently stroked Jaden's hand, whispering words of love and encouragement, hoping he could somehow hear her. The next morning, Lisa was startled awake by the sound of voices in the hallway. A nurse stepped in, followed by a man in a suit who introduced himself as Mr. Bradley, a lawyer from a local civil rights organization. "Ms. Parker," he began, his tone calm but firm, "I've heard about what happened to your son. I've seen the videos circulating online. I want to help you hold the people responsible accountable." Lisa hesitated. She had never dealt with lawyers or legal battles before. Her only focus had always been on her children. But now, looking at Jaden's fragile form, she knew she had to fight for him. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Bradley nodded, handing her a card. "First, we need to gather all the evidence, videos, witness statements, and any medical records. The more information we have, the stronger our case will be. I'll take care of the legal side, but your voice will be the most important." Lisa clenched her hands into fists, determination hardening in her chest. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. "No one should go through this. Not me, not my kids, not anyone." As word of Jaden's injury spread, the community rallied around Lisa. Supporters gathered outside the hospital, holding candles and signs that read "Justice for Jaden." Local activists organized meetings, and people who had witnessed the incident at the store came forward with their accounts. The videos taken that day showed the unnecessary force used by the officers, sparking even more outrage. Meanwhile, the police department released a brief statement, calling the incident regrettable and promising an internal investigation. But Lisa knew better than to trust empty words. She had seen how quickly such promises could fade without pressure from the public. Reporters began contacting her for interviews, wanting to hear her side of the story. Though overwhelmed, Lisa realized the power of her voice. With Mr. Bradley's guidance, she sat down for her first televised interview, speaking directly to the community. "My son is fighting for his life because of reckless actions," Lisa said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This isn't just about my family. It's about every family. We deserve to feel safe, not threatened. I won't stop until there's justice for Jaden." The interview spread quickly, reaching far beyond their small town. Strangers from across the country reached out with messages of support, donations, and offers to help. Lisa felt a small glimmer of hope. She couldn't undo what had happened, but she could ensure that Jaden's story made a difference. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't fighting this battle alone. As the days passed, Lisa found herself at the center of a growing movement. Her story wasn't just about Jaden anymore. It was about every parent, every child, and every person who had been affected by unfair treatment. People rallied behind her, their voices becoming louder with each passing day. Lisa knew she had to channel her grief into action, not just for her son, but for the countless others who had experienced injustice. Jaden remained in the ICU, his condition stable but critical. Lisa visited him every day, holding his hand and telling him about all the people fighting for him. Mia, still scared and confused, stayed by her mother's side, finding comfort in Lisa's strength. Lisa reminded her daughter every day, "We're going to be okay, Mia. We're a team, and we're going to get through this." Meanwhile, Mr. Bradley worked tirelessly to build their case. The evidence was strong. Eyewitness accounts, video footage, and medical reports all pointed to negligence and unnecessary force by the officers. The story gained national attention, with news outlets covering it and activists demanding accountability. Lisa, though hesitant at first, began speaking at rallies and community events. Each time she spoke, her voice grew stronger, her words resonating with the crowd. "This is not just about my son," she would say. "This is about change. It's about making sure no other child has to go through what Jaden did. It's about protecting our families and holding those in power accountable." The police department, facing mounting pressure, announced that the officers involved were placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. But Lisa knew this wasn't enough. "They can't just walk away from this," she told Mr. Bradley. "They need to be held responsible." As Lisa's fight for justice continued, the community's support grew. Local businesses put up signs that read, "We stand with Lisa," in their windows. Neighbors dropped off meals and offered to babysit Mia when Lisa needed to attend meetings or court dates. Strangers sent letters of encouragement, many of them sharing their own stories of hardship and resilience. One day, while visiting Jaden in the hospital, Lisa noticed something different. His fingers twitched ever so slightly. She gasped, calling for the nurse. The staff confirmed that it was a small but promising sign. "He's a fighter," the doctor said. "Don't give up hope." Tears streamed down Lisa's face as she leaned close to Jaden. "I knew you were strong," she whispered. "Keep fighting, baby. We're all here for you." That evening, Lisa attended a town hall meeting where city officials were present to address the growing unrest. Standing before the crowd, Lisa spoke with passion and determination. "This is about more than one child," she said. "It's about creating a future where every family can feel safe, where justice is not just a word but a reality." Her words were met with thunderous applause, but Lisa knew the fight wasn't over. It was only the beginning of a long journey, one she was determined to see through. The sun was setting outside the hospital, casting a warm glow over the building. But Lisa barely noticed. She was at Jaden's bedside as usual, holding his hand and talking to him softly. It had become her daily routine, a mixture of hope and prayer that he would wake up. But today felt different. Jaden's eyelids fluttered briefly, and his hand moved slightly in hers. Lisa gasped, leaning closer. "Jaden?" she whispered, her voice trembling. His eyes opened just a crack, and for the first time in days, Lisa saw his tired but familiar gaze. "Mommy," he murmured weakly. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed a kiss to his forehead. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Mia, sitting nearby with a coloring book, jumped up and ran to her brother's bedside. "Jaden, you're awake," she cried, wrapping her small arms around him carefully. Jaden managed a faint smile, his strength slowly returning. Lisa's heart swelled with relief, but she knew their journey was far from over. He still needed time to recover, and the fight for justice was ongoing. Later that day, Mr. Bradley arrived at the hospital with news. "The officers involved are facing charges," he said, his tone serious. "They've been accused of negligence and misuse of authority. It's a big step, but we still have a long way to go." Lisa felt a mix of emotions, relief that there was progress, but frustration that it had taken so much pain to get to this point. "What happens next?" she asked. "We'll need you to testify," Mr. Bradley explained. "Your voice has been powerful so far, but in court it will be even more important." Lisa nodded. She had never imagined herself in a courtroom, but she was ready to do whatever it took. Jaden's voice was too young and too hurt to speak for himself, so she would be his voice. In the days leading up to the trial, the community continued to rally around Lisa. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, chanting for accountability and reform. People from all walks of life joined together, united by the desire to create a safer, more just system. Lisa prepared herself for the testimony, practicing with Mr. Bradley, and speaking from her heart. When the day finally came, she walked into the courtroom holding Maya's hand, her head held high. Jaden, still recovering, stayed with a trusted neighbor who had become like family during this difficult time. As Lisa took the stand, she looked out at the crowded room. She saw her community, her supporters, and even people she didn't know who had come to stand with her. Her voice was steady as she recounted the events, her words filled with pain, but also determination. "This isn't just about my son," she said firmly. "This is about every child, every mother, every family that has ever been overlooked or mistreated. It's about change, real change." Her testimony left the room silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Lisa stepped down, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. She had done her part, and now she could only hope that justice would follow. The courtroom was packed as the trial reached its conclusion. Lisa sat in the front row, clutching Mia's hand while Mr. Bradley stood beside her. Jaden, still recovering but stronger now, was home with a trusted neighbor. Lisa's heart was heavy with anticipation, but also with hope. She had done everything she could, and now it was in the hands of the jury. When the verdict was announced, the room fell silent. The officers involved were found guilty of negligence and misuse of authority. They would face penalties, including the loss of their jobs and criminal charges. The court also mandated significant reforms within the police department, including better training and accountability measures. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, not of joy, but of relief. She hugged Mia tightly, whispering, "We did it, baby. We did it for Jaden." Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Supporters held up signs and chanted for justice, their voices carrying the message loud and clear. Lisa stepped outside to address the crowd, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This victory isn't just for my family," she said. "It's for every family, every child who deserves to feel safe and protected. We have a long way to go, but today is proof that change is possible." Her words were met with thunderous applause. Lisa knew her journey wasn't over, but this was a step in the right direction. The community had stood with her, and together they had made a difference. In the weeks that followed, Lisa focused on healing her family. Jaden continued to recover, regaining his strength little by little. Maya returned to school, her bright smile slowly coming back. Lisa herself began attending counseling to process the trauma, determined to be the best mother she could for her children. The reforms ordered by the court began to take shape. The police department introduced new policies to prevent incidents like this from happening again. Community leaders worked with law enforcement to rebuild trust, and Lisa played an active role in these efforts, sharing her story and advocating for meaningful change. One day, as Lisa walked with Jaden and Mia in the park, she watched her children laugh and play together. The weight on her shoulders felt lighter. Life wasn't perfect, but it was moving forward. "Mommy, look," Jaden said, holding up a flower he had picked. "For you." Lisa knelt down, taking the flower with a smile. "Thank you, sweetheart. It's beautiful, just like you and your sister." Mia hugged her mother tightly. "We love you, Mommy." Lisa's heart swelled with gratitude. Despite everything they had endured, they were still a family, and they were stronger than ever. As the sun set over the park, Lisa looked toward the future with hope. Her fight for justice had changed her life, and the lives of many others. And while the pain of the past would never completely fade, it had taught her the strength of love, resilience, and the power of a united community.